Thanks, sweet.
Enjoy your show.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Dan and Lexi from Dan Schultz Outdoors, reminding you to keep the adventures alive.
Hey y'all, I'm Johnny.
And I'm Colleen. And we're the Keel Quest. And we want you to keep the adventures alive. Cheers.
Hey, this is Darren from Ride Paddle Repeat, encouraging you to keep the adventures alive.
This is David from Beasley Ironworks saying keep the adventures alive.
I'm Jay. Let's go. From Jay's Way, keep the adventures alive.
Hi, I'm Kevin Collin, the Happy Camper. Remember, keep the adventures alive. Awesome!
Woo, buddy! Shug here! Keep the adventures alive. I am.
Ethan here, the Avid Outdoorsy Guy, reminding you to keep the adventures alive.
We're John and Aaron.
Keep the adventures alive.
Hey everyone, it's Kylan from Lure of the North, and I encourage you to keep the adventures alive.
This is Sky North telling you, keep the adventures alive. And now on with the show.
Tonight's episode of Canoehounds Outdoor Adventure Show is brought to you by OTG Meals. Fresh, freeze-dried, small-batch meals made for people on the go. Algonquin Outfitters, with 4 key locations in and around Algonquin Park to serve your backcountry needs. Kid Products, stick stoves and reflector ovens proudly made in Canada. And Novacraft Canoes, connecting you with nature in Canadian-made canoes since 1970.
Well, happy Tuesday evening and welcome back to another episode of Canoehounds Outdoor Adventure Show, a show that's going to bring you a lot closer to the great outdoors. My name is Dennis, also known as Canoehound, and if this is your first time tuning in, well, hey, 2 thumbs up to you. Thanks very much for tuning in. You're coming into a great show if you are a paddler and you're looking for some really far north canoe tripping information. Tonight's going to be the show for you. While we are just waiting for the chat over there to fill up there, I'm just going to get through a few of our early show announcements, and then we'll get on with tonight's topic, which is going to be a very good one and a huge learning experience for this guy. Let's see here. Did anybody out there miss last week's show? Last week we had a fantastic show. We were fortunate enough to have Les Stroud, good old Survivor Man, was on the show last week, and it was a really fun time. You know, it's the second time Les was on the show. And it was really a good time to have him on, and a big thrill for me being the Survivor Man fan that I am. But you know what? Contrary to the whole Survivor Man thing, we didn't really talk that much about Survivor Man. We talked about all the different things that Les has going on right now. He's got an award-winning children's book that he put out about a year ago, and it's continuing to win awards. He's got his VR game that's coming out. He's got his new popular series on PBS television called Wild Harvest, which is just gearing up, I guess, for its third season. So we had a lot of talk about those different things. And then, of course, we also discussed a lot of things that are really, really close to Les's heart, and that is his music career. He played for us a newly mastered song that's going to be coming out on his soon to be released double LP called Mother Earth. It's really he showed us, he actually cracked the plastic on this thing and showed us the artwork that was involved in the cover, and it's a double album. So keep an eye and an ear open for that there, because there's some really good music on that. But if you missed the show, you know what? By all means, you can go back and you can check out last week's episode in our past episodes playlist, and then you'll not have missed a thing. So please do go back and check that out. For those of you that might be in the Southern Ontario area, we do have another show. This is like trade show season right now. This is when everything's going on, everything from home shows and camping shows and outdoor shows. It's just everything, wedding shows. It's that time of year. But for this guy here, I'll be attending the fourth event in as many weeks, and that would be the Ontario Backcountry Canoe Symposium, which is happening in Waterloo. It's an event that I really enjoy attending, and there's a lot of great things going on there. There's some great vendors that you'll find there. It's a small, comfortable environment there, so there's going to be some vendors there. There's going to be 4 great presentations put on by John Babaluk, Evan Ferrari, Camper Christina, and topping off the show will be Kevin Callan. So I believe he'll be talking about his top 70 canoe routes book that has just been released. So if you haven't got a copy of that there, might make sure you pick that up as well. But it'd be a good opportunity for anybody in the area to pick up a copy right there from Kevin and actually have it signed. So you know what, if you can make it, there are tickets still available. Just go to the Ontario Backcountry Canoe Symposium website and you'll see a link there for buy tickets. And come on out. It's a fun event. I'll be there giving away stickers like I always do and hanging out with the good old folks from OTG Meals, Kid Products, and Novacraft Canoes, and a bunch of others. There's going to be a lot of great people there. So please come on out. Just wanted to say a quick special thanks to a couple of people who bought me my coffee for this week's show. Let's see if I can find it here. Here we go. Thanks to Raphael, where is it here? Raphael Golick and Irene Vandertop for picking up coffees for Canoe Hound for this show. Thank you very much. Here's to you in the Canoe Hound Adventures mug. Always great to receive coffee. I like beer too, but you know what? I think for the show here, I'd rather have the coffee. But thanks very much to you guys and gals. And you know what? Also, I'd like to do a quick shout out to my channel members. Without my channel members, you know what? This show probably wouldn't happen. They help offset the costs. And you know what? To all these people that are just drifting across the bottom of the screen here, you all know who you are. Thank you very, very much. I truly appreciate the support. And if anybody is interested in ever becoming a channel member, all you need to do is hit that join button that is down around here somewhere and just see what the details encompass. And you know what? It's a great way to support the channel. And yeah. It's doing good things. It's doing good things. Usually around this time, I do my birthday wishes or good wishes to various people. Well, you know what? With the exception of Maxim Budnick, who celebrated a birthday yesterday. Happy birthday, Maxim, if you happen to be in the chat there. You know what? There's no special occasions that I know of anyways. If anybody ever has a special wish that they'd like to share, whether it's a birthday anniversary, or you know what, it could be even celebrating a divorce. Who knows what it, you know. But make sure you drop me an email at canoehound@gmail.com, and I would be more than happy to get it up here and make the announcement for you and share it with everybody. Share the joy. Two more quick things before we get on with tonight's topic. If anybody has any hot topics or guests that they'd like to see right here on Canoe Hounds Outdoor Adventure Show, please do drop me an email at the same email address here. I do my darndest to make it happen. We do have a lot of great shows lined up here within the next month. So we're running down on episodes. I think we're down to about 11 or 12 episodes remaining for this season. So if you have any ideas, please do send them my way, because it sure helps to know what you people want to see. And then once again, tonight's show is going to be very interactive, as it always is. If you have any questions at all for myself or the panel, please do put it in the chat over there. Just put the word question in capital letters beforehand so I can mark it. I might not get to the question right away, but what I have been tending to do lately is I'll be saving these questions for towards the end of the show, and I'll sort of do like a rapid fire question period. And then if we have the time, maybe I'll even open up the panel to one or two guests to come on up and ask a question or two. That's always nice to see some new smiling faces on the screen here. So don't be shy when I do post that link. So on with the show. Let's get on with tonight's topic. You know, for the last couple of years, one of my bucket list trips has been to go up to Wabakimi, the Wabakimi area, Wabakimi Provincial Park, and do something that I've never done before, a fly-in trip, or possibly maybe even taking a train-in trip. There's so many different options. It's a pristine wilderness up there, and you know what? That wilderness harbors over 2.5 million hectares of land. It's a massive area. And you know what? Many who paddle up there, who have been on trips up there, say that you're more likely to see a caribou than you would be to see another person on a canoe trip of, let's say a week. To me, that's remoteness, and that's something that I really seek when I'm going out on a canoe trip. Well, you know what? Tonight we have 4 members of the Friends of Wabakimi. They've been kind enough to join us tonight to tell us a little bit more about the park and the allure of it, and maybe a bit of the politics of it, and how to go about planning a canoe trip in an area that only sees maybe 700 or 800 paddlers in a season. So that's pretty low numbers given the size of the area. So I'd like to welcome up 4 members of the Friends of Wabakimi. First, we're going to start with Vern Fish, who is the president of Friends of Wabakimi. How you doing, Vern?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Next, we have Dave McTeague, and we have Beth Rausch, and then we have Maurice Poland. All of which now Maurice has experienced a bit of internet difficulties, I guess. Is it storming up your area there, Maurice?
Apparently.
Okay, so we may have Maurice in intermittently.
A big storm.
The show, but that's Dave. Welcome to the show. Great to have you guys on.
Thank you.
Who wants to start by telling me about Friends of Wabakimi? What is Friends of Wabakimi?
Well, Dave, you're the board chair. Why don't you give us the start? And by the way, Dave's calling in from Oregon, so he's a long ways away.
Yes.
Well, Friends of Wabakimi was started in 2014 as an outgrowth of the Wabakimi project, and a lot of us were involved in. Not everybody, but we cleared portages and mapped for 14 years, and the Friends of Wabakimi was created to kind of carry on the work of the Wabakimi project and to advocate for the resource. So there's a vast network of historic canoe trails that run through the park, and then the surrounding crown lands and conservation reserves and waterway provincial parks as well. So it's a vast area, and we're there to advocate for it and to encourage people to get out and paddle and conserve this beautiful area.
Mm-hmm. So with this area needing this, because obviously, as I mentioned there, and I got this information from one of your rack cards here, but there's over 2.5 million hectares of land. What does that compare to?
Well, if you can kind of wrap your mind around this, it's if you include all the provincial parks and the Crown Land, it's basically 5 Prince Edward Islands or 1 Vermont. So if you got to kind of visualize the state of Vermont, you'd be able to paddle across that whole state and still be within this area that we call the Wabakimi Wilderness. It's a huge area. It's hard to comprehend how big it is. It's a virtual roadless wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you say roadless, that's typically the northern reaches, right? There are small access areas down below.
There's logging roads in the area. The five crown areas that surround the park and separate some of the provincial waterways and conservation reserves are separated by areas that are still actively being logged, and so there are both short-term and long-term logging roads that kind of weave through those. But the reality is, with the buffers that are built in, as a paddler, you really don't pick up on the fact that there might be logging on the other side of the hill or the other, across from the wetland. But so it seems like a continuous green space, although it is broken up by some industrial activity, but not very much.
Not very much, eh? Now we were mentioning, or I was mentioning in the green room down below there just before the show that it kind of strikes me as funny, but it's not funny, or it's not odd that so many Americans actually are on the board for Friends of Wabakimi, which is obviously located in Ontario. Why is that? There's so many people from the U.S. who actually love this area.
And I'll take this one too, but it's distance. I'm actually in Waterloo, Iowa, which is always confusing to Canadians. But it's 9 hours for me to drive to Thunder Bay. I can get to Armstrong, which is the gateway to Wabakimi, in 12 hours. And I know, as we discussed earlier, Dennis, it takes you a heck of a lot longer from Southern Ontario to get there. So just the fact that the drive is shorter. You're going to have more upper Midwesterners visit the park because they can get there. And so the reality is, they talk about Quetico being an international park. For all intents and purposes, Wabakimi is an international park just because of the driving distance. Our members are scattered all across North America, 5 time zones. We got multiple Europeans, and we got one member right now in New Zealand. So it truly is an international park, and the Friends of is really an international organization, even though we are technically an Ontario nonprofit.
Mm-hmm. And you saying that too, I'm very familiar with Friends of Temagami as well. And there again, just because it's Temagami region doesn't mean that people that sit on the board have to be within that region. It's just a bunch of common people that are sharing a love to help protect an area that is obviously near and dear to your hearts, right?
That's correct.
So let's go around the table. Maurice, do we have you? Can you hear us, or can you speak with us, sir? He's having them troubles, eh? Well, we'll start with Beth then. Beth, so what is your role with Friends of Wabakimi?
Well, I'm south of Maurice, and so I'll be out of here in about an hour because we're getting the weather he is. I'm in Lutsen, Minnesota. I'm a relative newbie, a newcomer to Wabakimi. So first of all, let me just say what an honor and truly a privilege it is to be paddling Canadian waters. We appreciate our Canadian friendship more than we say and more than you guys know. And we deeply respect the opportunity to paddle and make friends with our Canadians, and we treasure this relationship. We truly do. So it's really fun to watch this chat and see all these people that have been my mentors for many years on YouTube. So thank you. Wabakimi is a very special place, and it is not a beginner place. And I say that with full transparency. I thought I was a good paddler. I thought I knew a lot about paddling, and Wabakimi brings it to a whole nother level. And if you're ready for it, it is wonderful. It is beyond belief. If you're not ready for it, it has the potential to be a real problem for you. And Vern and Dave can talk more about that. So you really need to plan, and you need to think smart about Wabakimi. And above all else, you truly need to humble yourself to the wilderness. You need to recognize the wilderness is in control. You have to humble yourself to it. It is not just all laid out for you like Quetico and the boundary waters. But if you're ready for that, you are in for a treat of a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've heard that from so many people. So you go there and you expect to blaze a little bit, right? It's something that you have to dig your heels in to get around. Maurice, we'll try you again. Do we have you on? Can you hear us yet? Got a feeling this is going to be an ongoing issue tonight, right?
We're really getting some weather in the Superior region.
Yeah. You all are so fortunate that you're living in the U.S. and you're still closer to Wabakimi than I am, right? So I'm probably at least a minimum 20-hour drive from where I am down here in Niagara, Ontario. So yeah. So Dave, can you tell us what your role is with the Friends of Wabakimi?
Well, I'm the board chair, which means I basically handle the website and the membership system. I chair the board meetings, and I work close with Vern, and we make it all happen.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Now, I met a bunch of you, obviously, at the Toronto Outdoor Adventure Show. You guys you had a display set up there. Then I also met a bunch of you at Canoecopia there 2 weeks ago. And you are also going to have a presence at the Ontario Backcountry Canoe Symposium, which is this weekend in Waterloo, Ontario, not Waterloo, Iowa, right? So not to be confused. So you really are getting out there to spread the word of your, of the Friends group, right? For this particular cause. Why such a far reach?
Well, as you've already pointed out, we're a Canadian organization, but we had kind of lost our connection to our Canadian roots, particularly Southern Ontario, and so we made a conscious decision to get to the Toronto show, and it was well worth our time. And we got to meet you, but we also got to really link up with our Canadian members. And so we recognize that we've got to continue to build on that and to bring, there's something like 74 members that are in the Toronto area, and the only way we connect with them is through a Zoom meeting. And so we need to build on that. We want those members to be part of the organization, involved in the organization, serving on the board, and then helping us with our projects. So the best way to do that was to start to have a presence in Southern Ontario, and the Toronto Sports Show was the first step in that process.
Mm-hmm. Well, and obviously you were very well received there because you always had a lot of different people there. And I think part of that allure too is in educating the people is knowing the amount of people that are starting to catch interest with Wabakimi, right? I'll be honest with you, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you never heard much of Wabakimi, right? As a canoe destination. But now with this whole social media thing, one person's done it and they put their videos on, say, YouTube, and another person does it and they post it to Instagram or whatever the social media thing may be. All of a sudden, the park is starting to gain popularity, which is where you step in to try and keep things at bay. Is that a good way?
Well, one of the challenges with Wabakimi is that it really doesn't have a map or a guide, or it didn't, and so that's part of what we have filled in is we've worked very closely with the park staff, and we've just updated our planning map, and so now that's available on our website. But we have close coordination with the park staff to help people organize. And then what Phil Cotton did during his years of work out there, I know it's hard to see, but he created 5 volumes of canoe routes. And so we still have those available. So thank you. So and the other thing that we've just recently added, working with Lawrence Mills, a Canadian, is some of the more popular routes. Is what we call the Wabakimi Canoe Route Guidebook, which really focuses on those routes that are probably appropriate for an entry-level paddler or somebody that wants to do their first trip. I mean, one of the things that I particularly like about Wabakimi is there's just so much of it that just isn't maintained. There are routes out there, historical routes. You have to do a lot of homework to find them, but you can go down rivers that you might be the only person that year, or maybe in the last decade, that has used that route. So you have routes that are traveled, not by a lot of people, and then you have absolute remoteness. And as you noted, you might have a better chance of seeing a caribou than you will another paddler, depending on the type of adventure you want. And I'll even add one more thing to that. The other piece that's kind of neat about Wabakimi is there's flat water and there's also just some outstanding whitewater. If you've never been on the Upper Albany, a spectacular river system with really incredible whitewater with 3 or 4 major waterfalls, very remote. It's got the whole package if you got the skill set for it. And yet there are other areas that are really designed for flat water paddlers and will provide a wilderness experience without the adrenaline rush of trying to run a class 3.
Interesting. Now you're showing these books and the map that you've put together. These obviously are got to be in demand. We'll just say, because, like I say, the popularity of Wabakimi is really growing. As I mentioned, it's on my bucket list, and the guys I paddle with are our list. And one of the things I was discussing with you at the Toronto Outdoor Adventure Show, they all get mixed up.
Yeah, they blur together after a while.
Right. Yeah. So we were talking about how to plan a trip to Wabakimi, because it is such a vast area, and everybody knows the icon who is displayed right next to you guys at that same show, who is a Wabakimi legend, pretty much, being Bruce from Wabakimi Outfitters, right?
Yep.
What's a good starting point? What's a good way to get started when it comes to planning a trip to Wabakimi?
I would say the first thing is to kind of figure out how long you have. A Wabakimi is challenging for shorter trips, but those are the trips that I've done quite a few of and can talk about. But a lot of people probably need 9 to 12 days to do a Wabakimi trip. I mean, getting there is it's a little further than a lot of places, and then you need to kind of have some idea how far you want to travel or how fast you think you could travel. I'm not one of those people that can do 30 kilometers a day, and like some can, but so that's a factor. So then you kind of get a sense of how long you want your route to be, and then there's some some well-known places to start and some well-known places to end in the park. You could start with those. So there's some popular go-to routes, and then there's some really more rugged and less traveled routes, and then there's the routes that only certain people go to, and I'll let Vern talk about those. But it's like a real popular route, and a lot of people have done it, is either fly to Allen Water Bridge or take the train to Allen Water Bridge, and then go north on the Allen Water through either Wabakimi or loop up to Whitewater Lake, and then come down through the Berg River and out through Smooth Rock, and then Big Caribou and Little Caribou, and there's a road takeout at the Little Caribou Lake that's used by many people. So that would be probably the classic Wabakimi route that quite a few people have done, and there's numerous trip reports about that route. And I think people typically do that in 9 to 12 days, depending on how fast you want. And that's just one example of probably one of the most typical routes.
Hey, Dave, while you got the floor, why don't you talk about trip reports and where we put them and how to access them? Because that's an important part of planning a trip, is seeing what somebody else has done. And Dave's he's the web keeper on that.
We have on our website is a trip report forum, and you can get at it through our wabakimi.org website. But then if you go into that, it may also take you into our interactive membership website. So anybody can post a trip, or they can send the trip to us and we'll post it for you. I posted a really, really great trip report yesterday that was done by some of our founding FOW members, Barry Simon and John Kinclair, of their Kopka River trip of 2017. And John Sinclair did a beautiful, detailed trip report. The Kopka is a fabulous route. I mean, it's up there with the Albany River and it's very popular. And that also starts at Allen Water Bridge for a lot of people, but then you go south on the Bright Sand River and then over Haida Land into the Kopka and follow the Kopka all the way to Highway 527. So, but that trip report is, you can see it. I also posted it on our Facebook page, so you can access it that way as well from the Friends of Wabakimi Facebook page. But then the form is searchable. So if you want to say Flint River routes, for example, you can just plug in Flint River and it'll pop up all the reports that mention the Flint River. And so not everybody's trip report is in there, but we keep adding to it and trying to build a library of reports. An excellent source of information. If you're planning a trip, you want to try and find a trip report on your route. I do that extensively before I go on any trip in Wabakimi. I try and find everything there is to know about that route.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that there are different ways to access, whether it's by train, by plane, and the old man in the canoe is asking, is there logging road access to the park?
Yeah, there are some. There aren't very many. Just the physical layout doesn't lend itself well to road access. There are a few access points on the far west side off of 599, which is the road that ends at Pickle Lake. There are a couple points that you can access the Crown Land and then work your way into the park. There is far less on the east side. There are some. Probably the more common one is Little Caribou into Big Caribou, and then that opens up the whole east side of the park. But you really shouldn't plan on using your vehicle as your access mechanism unless you work with an outfitter. I'm looking at some of the comments. They mentioned Clem, and Clem is one of the drivers that can get you in on a remote road. So there are local people. I believe he's the postmaster in Armstrong. Sure. There are local people that can drop you off. There are outfitters that can drop you off. I got to be honest. What I encourage people to do is take a look at the fly-in, and I believe, Dennis, you and I talked about that. For some people, particularly for us Iowans, Midwesterners, strapping your canoe onto a float plane, onto a beaver or an otter, and then flying out and landing and going through that whole procedure, it's something you don't get to do. It's almost a once-a-lifetime experience. And Wabakimi is a perfect place to do it the first time because it's big enough that it justifies getting on the float plane. And sometimes it's the only way you can get in, and sometimes it's the only way you can get out because of the limited access, unless you're taking the train and when you come out to a handful of roads. So I really encourage people to use the plane aspect, and it's not that expensive. I personally think it's well worth it. If you do a far north trip, it can cost you thousands of dollars, whereas Wabakimi is more in the hundreds of dollars range, so it's doable. So that's a neat thrill, and I think Wabakimi is a great place to do your first float plane trip.
Right. I believe when I was talking to Bruce at Canoecopia, we thought we were going to throw Bruce a challenge at planning a trip because the party of guys that I'm planning on going up with is going to be probably like a party of 7, possibly 8 guys. And I always know that, remote Crown Land areas, sometimes it's challenging to have a campsite that's big enough for these groups. But a couple of us want to fly in and a couple want to do road access or sort of like a shuttle service, which Bruce said he can actually shuttle people in down these roads like this, right? And so I says to Bruce, I go, so we got a couple of guys that want to fly in, we got a couple of guys that want to be shuttled in, but we want to kind of meet in the middle of the trip somehow and finish the trip together. And he mapped that out for me quite literally in about 2 minutes, and then he goes, and that'll be $10 for the map, please.
Yeah,
and it's like, it was worth the $10, right? But yeah, it's one of those things where the fly-in is something that's always appeased to me. So it's what I want to do because it's been one of my bucket list things. So it's we'll get to check this one off hopefully this year. Yeah.
So
yes,
on the southwest side, there is a direct road access park to Wabakimi Provincial Park. It's a Vista Road, and there's a great trip report. It's in our forum, but it's also in the bwca.com trip report form by Melissa Gray, and she and her husband last year left their car at the Vista Road entry point, and then it follows the Flint River north to the train, and then they go over the train tracks and continued north, and they did a big lollipop loop trip from that point where they left there, they paddled north, they did a big loop around through Brennan Falls and back to the Flint River, and then back down. They saw lots of wildlife, and I think that was like an 18-day trip. It was a long trip, and then they came back out where their car was at the Vista Road entry point. So that's the only place, one of two places where the park actually touches a road, and that's a more established road. The other place where the park touches a road, and there's some controversy about this, is the Trail Lake then becomes the Tamarack Lake Road from Armstrong. It's very much a bush road, and Clem will take people in there. Bruce has taken people in there. I've been in there. But there's some concern that too many people will impact the caribou in that area. So that's something that we've become a little more sensitive about. But it does get you into a little corner of the park that's very nice for a shorter trip.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Is it only how many different outfitters are servicing Wabakimi right now?
Good question. There's probably maybe 3 on the east side, and I gotta be honest, I'm not aware of there's the hotel operator at Savant Lake might be doing shuttles. Is that correct?
Yes, he did a shuttle for me, and he's doing a shuttle this year for Ramblin' Boy from Toronto, and so he's a little expensive, but he's the new owner of the Four Winds Motor Hotel. His name is John, and so we'd like to encourage him to do the shuttles, since he's the only one there apparently who's willing to do them. There's also a fly-in outpost operation called Rusty Myers.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard of them flying people in and out of that area. We haven't had a lot of contact with them, but that's another option to explore as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And how many people are offering fly-in though? Is it just Wabakimi outfitters?
Well,
Bruce?
It seems that Bruce and Matisse Lake Outfitters, which is Don and Annette Elliott, they seem to use the same fly-in outfit, Wabakimi Air. I'm not sure. There may be some other options available, but the outfitters seem to know who to go to get the airplanes that you need.
Very interesting. Okay, so I'd like to really get some input here by Maurice. I'm not sure. Can you hear us, Maurice? Can you give us a wave, maybe? Every once in a while, I see him move there, but I'm not sure he can hear us or not. No, I think we're going to have a little bit of a tough time with that. Okay, so we'll just keep moving on then. You know what? There's a couple of interesting questions here that I wouldn't mind popping up on panel if you guys want to, guys and gals, sorry, Beth, would like to answer a few questions here. Donald Dakota's asking, open water season, mid-October, is that about right?
Middle of May might be a little early. Beth and I did a trip last year. I believe we went in like May 20th, and we were really scratching our heads as to whether the ice was going to be out. And mid-September you're probably going to have snowflakes and cold weather. Doesn't mean it's going to be an ice up, but it could be. You could see snow by mid-September. So that maybe that last week or two of May, and then those first couple of weeks of September is kind of your season for paddling.
Mm-hmm. And plus, early season, you probably have a lot of fast water going, or high water levels.
We did this year, yeah. Beth and I were up there in late May, and we had a lot of high water. Beth, you can expand upon that.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and the high water really impacts your trip.
Yeah,
I think it's really important if it's your first time to this park. I think it's really important to work with an outfitter or work within a group that's been there before. That was the advice given to me, and it was very true. I wouldn't hesitate to go now, and do my own thing like I'm used to doing, but that was good advice. And because there are a lot of variables, there's water level and there's logs on the road, there's blowdown, there's fire, and it's not well maintained. It's a big area, and there's not portage crews going through every 2 kilometers like there are in Quetico. So you need to bring a saw, you need to be prepared to do portage maintenance, help us out in that regard. It's very important. But I also think that there's also ways, if you work with an outfitter and say, this is our first time, then they will put you on a route that's relatively well-traveled, like the Kopka, well-traveled, Palisade, Burnt Rock down to Whitewater, the Berg, well-traveled. If you move into perimeter areas or areas that are not well-traveled, it will be you really need to be prepared for that. So communicate with others to formulate the kind of thing you're looking for, and that'll be your best bet. It really will.
Okay. You kind of answered one of my questions there, Beth, too. I was going to ask if you encourage those that go in to actually perform trail maintenance on the trails, as long as you're sticking to the trails, right?
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. An LNT. I mean, we're not bringing chainsaws in with friends of me, but we are bringing saws. And if you can leave a blaze, for example, last year we found a blaze and the tree was in the water. You could not report it. So we took a new tree and made a blaze because the previous one was in the water. And these kind of practices, in the boundary waters in Quetico, you don't do that. But in Wabakimi, it's a little different. I think without those, I don't know. Vern and Dave can talk to that, and Maurice too. But we made blazes because but smartly, you're not doing a bunch of bushcrafting. You want to leave no trace, but at the same time, you don't want to leave people stranded without an option right before the rapids on river left, and they should be river right.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah, for sure.
If I just expand upon that, the route is lucky if they can get a crew down a route every 3 to 5 years, and that's within the park. When you get out in the Crown Land, there's nobody doing any maintenance, and so the maintenance is happening by boots and canoes going through and an occasional saw. So there's value in maintaining and opening the route that you're on without getting carried away. And Beth's absolutely right. It's almost criminal to not mark a portage, because that could be a major issue to the next party coming up behind, you getting lost or running something they shouldn't be running. So there's value in doing that. Be thinking about your partner, but yet still leaving the wilderness as you found it, but just make it a little easier for the next person to get down the route.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, let me just expand on that just a little bit further. If you're in Quetico or in the boundary waters, if you wait a little bit of time, you're going to see some people coming through. And in Wabakimi, you might not see somebody come through for weeks. It really is that remote, especially if you're going off of where the outfitters are putting you. And even on those trails where outfitters are putting you, you might not see somebody come through for a long time. The closer you get to Caribou, you'll see more people, Caribou Lake, and some of the other common places. But if you get up into the center or the north of the park, it could be a really long time. And there's been times in the boundary waters where you're a little confused or turned around or Quetico, and pretty soon you're going to see somebody moving through and you'll get your bearings again. It won't be like that there.
Yeah. The remoteness, I'm sure, is quite beautiful, and that's something I really am seeking myself. Now, Wabakimi's composed. It's not just Wabakimi Provincial Park. The whole area, the Wabakimi area, is composed of several provincial parks, conservation reserves, and things of that sort. Can you tell us a little bit about what is up there and what makes up Wabakimi?
Well, I'll kind of lay out the boundaries. If you start on the north, The Albany River is our definition of the northern part of Wabakimi, and the Albany probably doesn't need a lot of explanation. It's famous as a far north trip. I always considered it my first far north trip. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of whitewater. There are several major falls, which are just spectacular. And it's a good, 10, 11, 12-day trip. So that's the northern boundary. The southern boundary, as the Friends of Wabakimi define it, is the Ottertooth drainage, and that's a separate provincial park. And I've been very fortunate. I got to do the Ottertooth, one of the things that makes the Ottertooth famous is that there's about a 5 to 10 kilometer canyon that took us parts of 3 days to get through. Incredibly difficult, incredibly dangerous, beautiful, spectacular scenery, but it's not for the faint of heart. And that's the far southern edge of the Wabakimi area. The eastern edge is basically I'm drawing blank on my river. It's the White Sand. I should know that is the White Sand, and that stretch is famous for Cliff Lake, which you can kind of see over my shoulder. There's a little canoe, and barely you can see some of the pictographs that are on it. Though those are pictographs from Cliff Lake, and it's a famous lake for that. I mean, it's got vertical. Yeah, you can I'll kind of get out of the way. You can sort of see some of those images on. This is an image done by Kevin Belmore, who made this image for the park and for the Friends of Wabakimi, and we actually sell that through one of our partners in Thunder Bay, Creative Designs, and that's on our website. You can get more information about that. And the whatever money we make off this goes into youth foundations in Thunder Bay. But the eastern part is the White Sands route, which includes Cliff Lake. And then on the west side, it's basically Highway 599 and Savant Lake forms the western boundary. And so it's just a huge area, and there are a lot of just signature waterways that are famous for a variety of different things. The Albany is for its whitewater and waterfalls. The White Sand is for its pictographs. The Ottertooth is for its canyons, and then Savant Lake on the west side is a big lake on the west side of the park, and there's a lot of ground in between that most people never get to.
Wow, that's incredible. So now someone was asking over and above. Let's see if I can find this here. Oh, here it is. What's the Friends of Wabakimi's relationship with the parks people in the area?
Dave, you want to start off, and I'd be happy to jump in.
We have a very, very good working relationship with the park, and we've been working on that relationship. And we've done 3 fundraising projects in support of park projects, and we started by helping them fly out big piles of legacy debris, crap that's been sitting on the landscape for years and years. They flew in, they cut up some old boats, and they flew them out on this huge plane that can land on land and water. And that was our first project. The second project, we're helping them fund and build a kiosk, and that artwork,
which has this image on the kiosk. The image,
right. That artwork was a special commission for the kiosk project, and Parks got a grant, and so we're helping fund a kiosk that's going to be built in. Put in Armstrong, and then we're going to try and get some signs so people will know it's there. And I'm trying to encourage the park to put a second kiosk, maybe at Allen Water Bridge or something like that. And our third project this year was to buy 11 remote birdsong meters for the park, because they're going to put them out in the spring as part of the Bird Atlas survey that's going on, the third Bird Atlas survey, which is a big project in Ontario. And we haven't figured out this year's project yet. We're hoping the park will come up with some ideas, but it's a way for our members to participate with the park, and it also shows our commitment to working with the park in a positive way, because we do also know that the park is working on a park management plan, because they don't actually have a formal park management plan. So the next phase of that process is sitting on a desk at the Ontario Parks office in Peterborough. So at some point, we're going to get the first look at the background information. And at some point, we're going to have a major interaction with the park over some internal park management issues. And so we have a good relationship with them. And I'll give Vern credit for that because he's really worked on that hard.
And I will emphasize that this planning map was a cooperative effort. They made the park staff made multiple revisions to our update on this, so it really is a reflection of the park staff and our paddling expertise being out there. But this was a joint effort with the park staff, and I'm going to guess that they may be using this as part of their promotion, but we're selling it right now. But they certainly helped put it together. So I think that emphasizes the relationship that we have with the park staff, and we look forward to helping them further their missions and making it a more enjoyable visit for the visitor.
With that being said, Kevin Callan's asking any reason why Ontario Parks has not created its own park map. But is that your thing that
that's the old part? Yeah, they had one, and we felt that there were some things that could be done to improve it, and we kind of took that idea to the park staff, and this is what came out of it. It was a joint effort between our expertise, our people who are out on the land, and what they want to see from a park management standpoint.
Right. Just want to point out to everybody that's in the chat over there that I am marking questions, and like I say, I'm trying to bring them into the live stream here at a relevant time. But if we do miss any of the questions that have been posted there, I will try to get them up a little later in the show. There is sort of like a rapid fire type of question opportunity. So keep the questions coming. After all, this is a learning experience for me, and it's a learning experience for all of you. And let's try and get your questions answered to make this a happy place for everybody, right? That's all right. So now, what kind of work has actually gone into producing this map? You had a map that you were distributing at the shows. This is the old planning map, right?
Yep.
And now you come up. How many modifications, or what type of modifications have been made?
Well, there's a couple things that we brought into it. The old park map that you made reference to, and that Dave held up just a second or two ago, it actually showed all the old cabin sites. Our map didn't have that, and our old map didn't show where the quadrants were for Ontario or for topographic maps. So the new map has all the cabin sites. It has the topographic maps on it. It also has the train stops on the south boundary. And we've also included the quote unquote official park entry points. I think there's 16 of them or something like that. So those are listed in there. It also has the telephone numbers, who to call when you get in trouble. And the OPP is about all you can call, and they're going to be working with the park staff. There is not a search and rescue team that's assigned to Wabakimi. If you get in trouble, it's going to be a cooperative effort of a lot of people to get you out. But at least we've got that information in there. And Dave, I'm trying to think, what else did we add to this that was not in previous documents?
We differentiated between the routes that the park maintained and the other historic routes. So we didn't have that on our previous map. Not that all the park routes get maintained all that often.
No. But I think what we've created is a very good tool to help plan your trip. It's a good starting point. It's got a lot of information, and then it's just that first step that you need to take to start to visualize what your adventure is going to be.
And for us, the important thing is we can make changes in this map.
Yeah.
Because we were stuck. We lost the source file to the old map, and we couldn't make any changes. And there was a route that the park wanted us to take off the map because it went through some sensitive habitat for caribou. And so we weren't able to do anything about that, but we took that off. So if we need to make a change, an update, we can do it very easily. We've worked with Dan at Go Trekkers Maps in L'Orange, Saskatchewan, and he was outstanding to work with. He has an awesome website of canoe maps in his own right. They've mapped. He comes from a canoeing family, and they've mapped northern Saskatchewan. So he's been excellent to work with, and we're going to work with him going forward.
Excellent, excellent. That's great. You know, to have so many, whether it's an older resource or a new resource, it's great to have these resources for such a vast area. You know, so yeah, that's cool. Um, let's get into some of the features that are highlights or features that like kind of must see things in the Wabakimi area. Like I understand that there's some really unique old cabins there.
Well, yeah, there's some old ones. There are some of them that have fallen down, basically have been abandoned, and we chose not to put those on the map. There's a scattering of those out there. There are some very relatively modern cabins, but I think the one that most people think of as unique is the one on Best Island, which is the famous hermit that lived out on the. I apologize for turning my head. I got a map over here, and I'm staring at it. But it's the Beckworth cabin on Best Island, which is in Whitewater Lake, and there, a famous story behind that. An American came up, basically squatted on Canadian land, stayed there for quite a long time, and ended his life there. But he was somewhat of a genius. He did all kinds of architectural designs. He created very efficient cabins. The Snail is one of the cabins he built that was very, very energy efficient. And for years, it became kind of a go-to stop place for outward bound groups and groups paddling through. But since Beckworth has passed on, the park is sort of kind of struggling with, do we maintain it? Do we allow it to disappear? And right now it's sort of in a arrested decay. It's sort of fallen apart. You can still go see it. It's basically still there. Somebody has put a tarp over one of the roofs and kind of supporting it. But it's a little bit of the unusual history of a hermit who came and basically kind of squatted on Canadian ground. But a lot of people came and saw the cabin. And so it's just kind of one of those little special, odd things that you don't get to see just anywhere but Whitewater Lake and Wabakimi Provincial Park.
It's a story that Wabakimi has to tell, right?
Yeah, it is. It's and there's a museum in Thunder Bay that's very worth going to see the history of this, and it's a kind of a fascinating story. And it's amazing how many people at some point in their life have wanted to go disappear into the wilderness to find themselves or whatever it is. And Bruce Heyer, who's the operator, one of the outfitters, he did that. He came in and spent a year in a teepee and then another year in a cabin. And he's not the only one that's done that. But Beckworth got a lot more publicity because he was such a very talented individual, did a lot of creative stuff, also had some very strange thoughts. He assumed he was in the center of the universe. And there's still some question as to how he drew his lines to come up with that definition. But it's just a unique place, and it's just one of those things that you don't just see in every wilderness trip.
Well, would the Friends of Wabakimi ever consider trying to preserve that?
Go ahead, Beth.
I want to talk about this just a little bit. So this Beckwith Cabins compound is an interesting story. So he was an American. He was from Wisconsin, ironically from Whitewater, Wisconsin. And he wanted to leave. He left a marriage. He left 5 kids, whatever you want to say about that. He went into Whitewater in collaboration with a man from San Francisco, a businessman. So the businessman funded all this, and they went and they squatted on Canadian land, and he built all these places. It has a part of it that is, do you want to maintain this? And the whole question, I want to talk to Kevin's question of why aren't we maintaining this? Because it is an interesting structure. It's an architectural feat, no question about it. And he had a very good relationship with the indigenous people in the community per the documentary. But I don't think that he wanted it maintained. I think he saw it going back to the land, eventually going back to the wilderness. He didn't want to Disneyfy it, as some of our Canadian friends have said. And it's a complex issue. What do we say on social media? It's complicated. It is an interesting place to visit, but it does have a story aside to it that is not kind of this pure, like, I'm just going to go and get away. And I think if we did this now in 2023 and just went and bushcrafted our way through this as Americans, just going up there and squatting all this, it would be a little different, right? And so you have to it in context, it would be very difficult to maintain too, expensive. And is that where we allocate our resources when we have caribou and endangered bird species nesting there? Where do we allocate our resources? Speaking as an American, where do the Canadians allocate their resources? So good question, though. Really good question.
It's fun. It's funny how time, like the times that we're in right now, dictate that type of a conversation to say, what would have been like 25 or 50 years ago, right? As compared to now. Back then, maybe as wrong as it may have been, the whole squatting thing and, just taking a piece of land and doing what he wanted to do with it versus now. Yeah, it's funny how time changes things, right? The whole perspective. Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. Thanks for adding that.
Make time too that we address these questions about the indigenous use of these lands. As Dave and Vern can talk about extensively, you see that use. I've seen that use. Kevin raises a really good question about Cliff Lake. This place is like a church to the indigenous people for hundreds of years. And how do we navigate that? Do we turn it into a paddler's paradise? What is the future of this park? There's a lot of questions out there, and they're very difficult questions. And I don't think any one person has the answers to it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, no, those are a couple of the go-to places, I guess, in Wabakimi as a couple of highlight points. I know I see in the chat over here, we got Canoe of the North. We have Keenan in here, and he just put out a video that highlighted both the cabin and Cliff Lake, which are two like phenomenal viewing areas to kind of must-see areas. And I guess it's one of those things, see it now, well, at least the cabin, see it now while you still can, right?
Yep.
And take lots of pictures because that's all that may be left within 20 years' time. So, yeah. Don't cry over it, Dave. Don't cry over it. What other type of highlighty things can we see besides the cabin and, Cliff Lake? What are big things? I know one big draw is obviously seeing caribou.
Which is a very special event because they're ghosts. If you see them on land, you probably your best shot is to see them swimming, which is a rare occurrence. So if you see a caribou, you better go buy a lottery ticket because your luck has turned. It's time to go take a chance at the casino down the road. But if you see it, that's a special event. I will argue that to me, some of the things that are kind of neat is there are several waterfalls. Savant Falls, the Albany has several. Those are kind of cool to get into. The Allen Water, the Brennan Falls. There are several on my bucket list I haven't got to yet. So just being able to get into one of those remote locations and spend a day at Savant Falls. It's a remote location and it's a pretty spectacular drop of water. And there's actually amazingly how many of those are scattered across the region. It's well worth getting into to see. And then from the fishing standpoint, and I'm not a hardcore angler, but in Iowa, we have a very small population of brook trout. Our brook trout maybe get to be about that big, but you go up on the northern part of Wabakimi, you're going to have brook trout the size of your paddle. And so just being able to see and catch a large brook trout, and I'm not even talking about muskies and northerns and walleye. From an angling standpoint, these are areas that don't get a lot of pressure. And so you're gonna have some pretty incredible fishing if you put yourself in the right position, and it's not hard to put yourself in the right position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll get into a little bit more about the fishing and the wildlife here. It's 8:00. I'm just going to take a quick commercial break to recognize my sponsors, and then we will come back. So everybody, this is a great opportunity to grab yourself a new beverage, get rid of an old beverage, but please do come back for the second half of the show because there's a lot more to come, I would say. Alrighty, see you in a moment.
There's nothing like being out there, For over 50 years, we've been connecting people with nature by building classic Canadian canoe designs using the best materials available. We built a reputation on durable, dependable canoes that allow you to focus on what's important, whether that's unplugging in remote wilderness, spending quality time with your favorite people, or nailing the perfect line. Visit novacraft.com to find the perfect canoe for you and locate your nearest authorized dealer.
Tonight's episode of Canoe Hounds Outdoor Adventure Show is brought to you by OTG Meals, fresh, freeze-dried, small batch meals made for people on the go. Algonquin Outfitters, with 4 key locations in and around Algonquin Park to serve your backcountry needs. Kid Products, stick stoves and reflector ovens proudly made in Canada. And Novacraft Canoes, connecting you with nature in Canadian-made canoes since 1970.
And welcome back to the second half of the show here on Canoe Hounds Outdoor Adventure Show. Tonight we're joined by members of Friends of Wabakimi, and we are talking about the park and all that it has to offer, as well as getting more information on Friends of Wabakimi themselves and all the good things that they are doing for the park. So let's just bring our panel back up here. We got Vern Fish, we have Beth, and we have Dave. How are we doing? We're back again, everybody. Everybody's all good?
All good.
Everybody in the order that they were before. There we go. That's a lot better. So when we left off, we were kind of talking about, Vern, you were talking about the wonderful fishing and wildlife sightings and stuff like that in the Wabakimi area. World-class destination, obviously, for walleye and pike and all these different species of fish. Any unique things up there that we should be aware of? Anybody that might be planning a trip up there as far as specific species? Or
well, the one that you'll probably never see, and we only know about because the park naturalist shared it with us, but they have field cameras they leave out during the winter, and there are wolverines that pass through the park. And talk about a ghost in the wilderness. I seriously doubt any of us will ever have the chance of seeing a wolverine, but they're there. And you already mentioned the caribou, but there aren't very many of them, 400 or less. So seeing them would be very special. The bird life, I'm going to throw that to Beth, because we actually did a trip into Crown Land in partnership with Ontario Nature to do a documentation of the bird life that was in the park. And I'm not a hardcore birder. I have a master's degree in biology, and I sort of understand what's out there, but I was blown away by what we ran into. So Beth, you want to kind of talk about the bird life that we ran into?
The bird life is amazing. If you are a birder or you're into the birds, when you really want to go is the peak migration and birding season, which correlates with the peak black fly season.
Timing is everything. Yeah.
We gotta eat, right?
But when the days are long and the black flies are intense, that's when they're feeding. They're nesting and feeding the youngs. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology put out a list of 70 tipping point species. These are species that we're going to lose in the next 50 years. They will go extinct in the next 50 years, and 10 of them are located in Wabakimi as breeding areas, breeding and nesting areas. So this is a really special place to see, ironically, the common nighthawk, which isn't so common. Remember when you were kids and you'd see the nighthawks flying around? They're not so common anymore. Wabakimi is a very, very important area for these birds. The olive-sided flycatcher, the Canada warbler, a very important species nesting, the three-toed black-backed woodpecker. These are very important areas for these species to nest. And if you're interested in adding these birds to your life list or just seeing them, paddling in Wabakimi will be a place to do that. The Bonaparte gull, really special. And I think if we can augment, or if we can amplify for people the opportunity to understand the ecology of the area and how it isn't just a park boundary like Vern and Dave have worked so hard to do in Maurice. I wish Maurice could be on this call. to tell you about the work of the crown lands around the area, these buffers and how important they are to the park wildlife. But the bird life is just fantastic. And I would encourage you to go in the black fly season.
Go in the black fly season, yeah. Yeah, just wear your bug jacket, right?
Right.
You know what? We have several great questions here that I really do want to field here. We'll go through it because I know a lot more are actually going to be coming up, and then maybe we can get into a little bit more about some canoe routes that you would suggest. Access points and planning these particular routes. But going to go way back here in the chat, back to like around 7:30 tonight. Annaline's asking, does anyone have experience with taking dogs on a trip through Wabakimi? Not sure how dogs would do on a float plane. Can anybody add to that? Because I have a dog.
I've actually been with a Chesapeake. That was Bernice. Bernice was incredibly well trained. She carried her own gear. She didn't beg for food. She was just a very well trained dog, and she loved the water. And so I think it can be done, but I think we all have horror stories of that maybe where we run into dogs that aren't well trained. I gotta be honest, I was reluctant to get in a plane with Bernice, but she did fine. She did great on the portages. She carried her own weight. She didn't bark. She sat. She didn't beg. And then she came over and slept in my tent at night. For some reason, she liked sleeping by me, but rather than her owner. So it can be done. I just don't know that all dogs are as well trained as Bernice that I got to paddle with.
Mm-hmm. But dog on a float plane is not an issue.
I think you need to know your dog and the pilot. Yeah. There's going to be a partnership between you and the pilot.
Excellent. Great question there, Angeline. Thanks very much for that. Next, we'll pull up a question here from Trey Gregory asking, Dave, we saw your boiling sand strip on YouTube. Do you recommend it for a first-time visit, the first week of July?
It's an excellent trip. It's just a lovely little area. Boiling Sands is a nifty little river where sometimes you paddle right between a few rocks, and that's the channel. And it takes you to the bottom of Smooth Rock Lake, and there's a wonderful island campsite right as you come out into the lake. And then we head down the south, the very south arm into the outlet of the Lookout River. And there's one long portage, but it's actually a really pretty portage. Some people have given it a name, the Fantasia Portage. And Lookout River is an awesome, sweet river with some nice drops and good fishing below the drops. And yeah, for an intro trip, it's a very beautiful area.
Excellent. Wow. Which could lead us kind of into the next question here from Untamed Ontario, asking, what's the perfect 2-week Wabakimi trip that maximizes scenery and solitude? Now, I bet that could be a number of different trips.
Yeah, Dave, you want to try and tackle that?
For the record, Dave sent me a list of different trips, short and long trips. Maybe he would share that with everybody.
It's all in my head at the moment. But our Lawrence Mills wrote a featured trip report in our guidebook for the Kopka River trip. So that's a lot of people's favorite trip, and there's some good YouTube videos too. That's a fairly long. That would be a vigorous 2-week trip to go all the way up the Bright Sand and then over the Kopka and all the way out. But I'd suggest doing something like going up the Flint River and then doing a big loop north through and then over through Whitewater and out to Caribou. That's another one. Or a nice trip that let's see, that one could go up the Allen Water and then segue over to the Nemo River system through Brennan Falls and then come down and go out the Nemo River.
Oh, did Dave freeze up on us?
I can't believe the weather's gone bad in Oregon. It appears. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah. Well, we'll let him finish that there. But while we're waiting for him to pop back in, and Dave, if you do fall out, just jump back in, and we'll get you back up on panel. Maybe we'll go around panel and ask Beth, and I'll ask you the same thing, Vern. What's your favorite trip in Wabakimi?
Wait a minute, is Beth froze too?
Beth too?
No, I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, okay. You got really still there. What's one of your favorite trips in the Wabakimi area, Beth?
You know, the whole park is worth exploring. I think that it depends on the objective of the trip, right? So you set your objective, and if the objective is to go in and fish and hunt, then you work with an outpost. If your objective is to have a very remote, perhaps spiritual experience, you can work with Clem. You can work with the First Nations in the area and craft a trip like that. But you set your intention for the trip and then work with that. I do want to circle back, though. I've been reading the chat, and one of the comments was that Friends of Wabakimi is an American resource. And I want to just talk to that really quickly because this is important. Friends of Wabakimi is an outstretch of a Canadian who set up the Wabakimi project, and that was aimed at identifying and restructuring or bringing to life the paddle routes in the park. And one of the things that it's hard to understand when you're not in the park, but these paddle routes are lost very quickly to weather. So when a storm blows through these spruce that are this big around and 150 years old, they blow down very quickly. So within a matter of years, you have this, and this over the Portage Trail. And Phil Cotton, a Canadian, devoted his whole entire last 20 years of his life to restoring these ancient portage trails. And the Friends of Wabakimi is an international group, and the more Canadian membership we can get, the better. We're definitely not an American resource, and reestablishing these paddle routes is critical to maintaining the intent of the park. So I just want to make sure I clarified that comment because that was a really good point.
And I will add to it. Our membership is about 50-50 with a few Europeans scattered in. So it really is an international park with an international board. And again, as we've noted, it's closer for me to drive from Waterloo, Iowa, than it is for somebody from Waterloo, Ontario to get there. So there's going to be some American presence just because it's a beautiful resource that's a relatively short distance away. But it is a Canadian park, and we are a Canadian organization. We just are split fairly evenly on both sides of the border.
And I commend all of you for doing all that. You know, that's a great thing. We'll get to it at the end of the show too. How you can actually, if anybody wants to join the Friends of Wabakimi, how they can go about doing so. Because I'm sure that there are several ways to be able to do that. So Vern, what's one of your favorite canoe routes along Wabakimi?
Well, again, it's like when people ask me, what do you want to do, or what can I do in Wabakimi? And my quick answer is, what kind of an adventure you want to have? And right. I'm into whitewater. I'm into remoteness. And so some of my trips have been feature those things. I already mentioned the Albany, which is an outstanding trip. Another little hidden resource at the far southern end is the Gull River. The Gull River is not easy to get into, and there's something like 38 Class 2, Class 3 drops in whatever the distance is, about 100 miles. That's a great opportunity to polish your whitewater skills in a remote setting. I already mentioned the Otter Tooth, which is the spectacular canyon, but incredibly difficult and dangerous to get in and out of. So there's some high adventure opportunities out there. One of my little favorite gems is in the far northern part of Wabakimi, and it's the Green Mantle. And it's a little tiny stream with some very manageable Class 1s, Class 2s, doesn't have a whole lot of portages, but incredibly remote. And so there are places like that where you can disappear There are some challenges. There are some not well-maintained portages. There are some incredible waterfalls. Occasionally, there are some pictograph or cultural sites along the way. And so it really kind of depends on what you're looking for. You want a high adventure? Do you just want solitude? Or do you want a combination with a little bit of fishing along the way? It's all there.
And I guess in all reality, that's the best reason why Beth said you should really talk to an outfitter to go into a place like that, because they know all the spots. They know the distances that you need to travel based on your skill. They know all these different things to get you in and out of Wabakimi, hopefully safely, and taking in the best experience possible, right? Based on what your wants and needs are. As I mentioned, I thought I was going to throw Bruce a curveball, and he had that outlined for me in like minutes. He was very, very knowledgeable. He even ticked on there. He goes, that's going to be your 3-4 days of travel from there to there, and you're going to meet up with your crew here. You can go to this campsite, and it's like, wow, this guy does really know his stuff, right? So that was really, really cool. I enjoyed that. I got to watch the man work, right? So,
yeah, he knows it like the back of his hand.
Yeah, for sure. Another question here from the chat there. Keenan from Canoe of the North asking, he's heard that the train service books up quickly. Is it true, or are they fairly flexible?
I got to be honest. I'm not familiar with that process, so I really can't give you an informed answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do know. I think Dave also sent me a rather extensive schedule for the train service, marking all the key drop off points and timelines and information about via rail. I will try to get that posted. Maybe I'll put a posting on my Facebook page and a link to this, or something maybe through CANOEHOUND'Adventures.com. I'll try and get that up there in the next couple of days so that everybody can have access to it if he doesn't mind, because it's a pretty good schedule to show the via rail line and how it actually runs and the key points or places for dropping off. So yeah.
It's on my bucket list to do a train trip. I mean, I haven't done it. That's another thing for me to get off my list is do a train trip.
Yeah, train trips are pretty cool. I've done the Bug Train, which services from Sudbury up to White River, and it's a great stopping point for like the Chapleau area, for Mizanabi, and then areas like the Spanish River, and a nice chain over there. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. Question from Dwayne B asking, how would you go about contacting Indigenous for permissions to sacred places? Do outfitters facilitate that?
Those are good questions. I saw one of the other questions was, is running a camera, taking a photograph. Those are tough questions. I got to be honest. I try to find those areas. But I'm also, I think I'm being respectful. I don't linger. I don't camp. I don't touch. I am guilty of taking photos. I got to be honest. I struggle with what the right answer for that is. I would, if somebody feels that they have a definitive answer, I would love to hear it. I've been very fortunate. I've traveled all over the Southwest United States and been able to backpack in and actually canoe into some remote indigenous sites, and they're all spiritual. They're all special. You can feel. I feel something when I'm there. I'm guilty of capturing it with a photograph, but I guess I'm trying to be respectful. And if that's not considered respectful, then I'll certainly take a relook at how my practices are. I'm not aware that there's any prescribed way to get permission, and maybe that should be something we as an organization should take more look at. But it's a good point, and I know the park does not map these locations. It's really by word of mouth. You're not going to find a book like in the Boundary Waters and Quetico that'll tell you where every pictograph site is. And so it really does take some extra effort to get there. And I think it's a rewarding experience when you do stand there for those few moments and reflect on the fact that somebody was here 400 or 500 years ago, standing in this very spot, articulating a message which I will not be able to understand because I do not have the cultural context. But just the fact that people have been here that long, I think makes the trip that much more special. So I do visit them, and I guess I hope I'm being respectful, but I I can't confirm that I am.
Yeah, I've heard stuff for and against it, and it would be actually maybe a really interesting show if I were able to have some representatives from the indigenous societies in the areas like Tamagami and maybe up Wabakimi to be able to maybe clear some myths for us as far as that's concerned, because after all, we do want to be respectful, right? We want to tread lightly on these types of things and not cause any harm or ill will, if I may. So, yeah, interesting. And you pointed out the other question, which was Canoe to North also asking, adding to Kevin's question, is it okay to photograph pictographs in Wabakimi? I know some parks like Quetico ask for people not to do so, but I haven't heard that about Wabakimi. That's yeah. Something maybe we'll have to try and explore one day. I think that'd be a good little topic one day.
Yeah, and I'm not aware that there's a specific policy in regards to that. So yeah, that is something that I mean there are pros and cons in regards to it. I guess part of my argument is that we're sharing that little piece of cultural heritage with the wider world, making people aware that that's there. But then if that's considered disrespectful, then maybe we need to reevaluate that. I look at it as I am hopefully trying to tell that story in my out of cultural context to people that have no experience whatsoever, and then letting them know that there was a whole world of people there before we showed up, and they're still living on the land somewhere, and if they haven't disappeared, they're still around. But if you don't tell that story, and those pictographs are certainly a powerful way to tell that story.
Mm-hmm. And I understand Cliff Lake is just full of pictographs.
You can spend a whole day and you're drifting by them so fast you really can't recognize the images as they go by. It's a spiritual place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get that. You probably just get that feeling inside of you, right?
You really kind of feel like somebody's looking over your shoulder, and it's one of those where it's time to leave. It's time. I've seen what I need to see. It's like walking out of a cemetery. It's time to walk away and leave. That was my feeling. I feel very privileged to be there, but I also felt like there's a point where it's just time for me to leave and let this place be quiet.
Mm-hmm. Dave, welcome back. Maybe.
Maybe.
How you doing, Dave? Have you got us there? We'll let him try and work out his woes there too. You know what? I feel your pain, because there was a time when I used to have bad internet here, and I had shows where that would happen to me throughout the whole show. And try to host a show and your internet connection, it's horrible. It's an uncomfortable feeling, this is for sure. You know what? So let's get into a little more maybe about planning a canoe trip. I know we've already touched on speaking with outfitters and doing your research using mapping and stuff. Basis points. Okay, where do we start? Ground zero.
Well, my recommendation is first of all, get a planning map. Turn it upside right. Get the planning map. Start with that. If you're looking for a more commonly paddled route, our canoe guide by Lawrence Mills, I think, is just an excellent starting point, because that'll help you narrow it down. What Lawrence has done very effectively is kind of lay out the details of the trip, help you make an informed decision. He gives you some idea how long it is, the difficulty, some of the lakes. It gives you a little sense of what you're going to see. You can sort of kind of frame it in your own mind, But then from that point on, and again, I've already thrown this out once, what kind of adventure are you looking for? In my case, I want to go kind of off the beaten path. And so what I do is I pull down the topo maps, which are identified on our planning map. I go to Toporama, which is the Canadian mapping site, and I can go in and I can basically create my own maps for segments of the park that don't have a map specifically for that route. And then I start doing my homework. I do trip reports, read every trip report I can find, and try and figure out where those portages are, get some sense, river left, river right, and I create my own map system. And so by doing that, I figure out what kind of adventure I want to have, but it's also, from my standpoint, it's a safety factor. I know where I'm going. I know what I'm getting into. I make a list of the features I'm going to be involved in. And then I have what I call a guardian angel back home. And I have a sat phone, and I'm in constant communication with that guardian angel who's tracking my trip. He or she's providing weather updates. And if I get in trouble, that's who is going to make the contact to get me out. They will have the contact information for the outfitter, for any rescue, depending on where I'm at. If I'm on the Rio Grande border in Big Bend, Texas, it's the Border Patrol. They're the ones that are going to come get me if I'm in trouble on the Rio Grande, because they can get anywhere. So I have all that stuff kind of figured out. I basically have a safety plan. I have a guardian angel I coordinate with. They're in contact with all the other people on my trip. We have multiple in reach, so we can communicate in case I lose it or it gets broke. Carrying a first aid kit, have first aid training. And so all of that kind of thinking, all the stuff that goes into having a safe, successful trip. If you're going to go further off the beaten path, you have to fine tune those skills. If you're going to stay on a route, like as Beth said, that in 2 or 3 days, somebody might paddle up behind you, that's less of an issue. But if you really want to be off the beaten path, see that area that nobody else goes to, then you really got to be thinking about your safety protocols and your risk management. And I've actually had to do 3 emergency and non-emergency exits in the last 5 years. And all of a sudden, all that stuff comes driving home to you, and you've got somebody puking up blood at 10:30 in a rainstorm. We got to get this guy out of here. This is not good. All my wilderness first aid training kicks in. We got to figure out how we get a hold of the guardian angel back home. How can we arrange transportation, where we're going to meet him, where we're going to get him out to? Can we get a plane in? How far do we have to go to get to that landing site? It kind of puts a whole different dimension on it. But if you really want that remote experience, that's the kind of stuff you got to be thinking about. If you want a flat water experience and you're not looking for white water, then you plan a trip that is not as rough and rugged. But you still need to have that backup. What happens if somebody gets sick in the middle of the trip, passes out, and all of a sudden you've got somebody that you probably should get back out to a hospital? Probably more than you want to hear, but the more adventure you have, the more planning goes into it.
Mm-hmm. What are your typical party sizes that are going in for?
4 or 6. I mean, the plane size becomes an issue on that. I mean, an otter can handle 4, 5, 6 people, depending on how much gear you pack into it. And an otter you can tie 2 canoes on the outside. A beaver works well for smaller groups. I've done a lot of. The problem with a 2-person trip is if something happens to your boat, you don't have a backup plan. If you got 2 boats, 4 people, at least you got another boat that can move and get you in and out. And for those in the audience, if you've ever had a boat pin on you, and I've had it happen to me once, that's a horrible feeling, seeing that boat wrap around, both ends come up, they touch on the top, and then every piece of wood, including your thwart and seats, are broken in the process. You get it out and you pop it out, and you're standing there going, we got 70 miles. How do we get this thing out of here? And I actually do a program called What's in Your Repair Kit, and I show that video, and you ought to see the look around the room. It's like they can't imagine that happening. But so again, that goes back to how remote you are. But the more people you have, you're probably in a better position from a safety standpoint, because there's another boat that can get you out, and there's more people to take care if you get in trouble.
Right. The one thing that Bruce had pointed out to me too, with some of the packages that he offers for his outfitting, is that communication. If you have your own device, being an InReach or a Zoleo or a Spot type of device, that you can actually be in contact with them. They'll give you weather reports and things like that based on the area that you're in. So, yeah, definitely an important thing to have with you out there is some sort of communication device, right?
Yeah, and the challenge with, and there's nothing wrong with renting it from the outfitter, but then the challenge is, if you're not totally familiar with it, all those features you just rattled off, if you really don't know how to use those, it may not be as valuable a tool to you. So I argue you're better off to invest, buy it, play with it, get to know it, and then make sure there's somebody else on the trip that can use it when you faint and fall over. Can somebody else get you out? So it's a good tool, but it's something you really should practice before you go out there in the backcountry. And you should have more than one person on the trip that knows how to use it.
Sure, yeah, and more than one device.
And more than one device, because they don't float. They do sink, and if you haven't got a little bobber on it, you can lose them.
Yeah, you got to have a fail safe there for sure. Another question here, and this is pretty unique too. I never thought of this here, but can one ski plane into the park in the winter and snowshoe trek
That would
out?
be a heck of a trip. That would be a Bruce Heyer question, because I know he did a lot of winter camping and winter travel. I'm assuming you could. I'm not aware of anybody doing it, and I haven't seen a trip report. When you do it, take photos and send us a trip report. We need to post that. That'd make a great presentation at Toronto Sports Show.
Yeah, it sounds like an Adam Schultz or a Jim Baird type of project, right?
Yeah,
Get yourself up there and put a nice YouTube video.
Yeah, at 40 below, that would be a hell of an adventure.
Yeah. So how often are you yourselves in the park tripping? Is it once a year, once every couple of years, couple times a year? What's your frequency?
I was very fortunate. Last year, I was in there 3 or 4 times. I may not be as fortunate this year. I have other trips that I'm working around, but I try to get there once or twice a year. Because again, it's relatively short drive for me. It's not that difficult to get there. And it's such a huge area. It's going to take me the rest of my life to get to all the spectacular corners. There's still a lot of corners I haven't been to yet.
Mm-hmm. How about yourself, Beth?
I was just reading the comments about clearing Big River, and that was a trip Vern and I did last spring. And this was done in 2015, and finding those portages in high water, and nobody had really been through there regularly in the last 7 years. COVID hit too, that impacted it, but it just really speaks to how remote some of these areas are, and how quickly, you read about these portages have existed for centuries, but they go away pretty quickly with blowdown and with fire and with regrowth. So I think that's important to realize when you're traveling in an area like this.
Mm-hmm. Which is another reason why people need to go see and travel those routes, because they will be maintained by feet and canoes being dragged across them. And if we don't get people out there, and I've heard Kevin Callan say this, if we don't get people out there, they will go away. And so I think that's part of what Phil Cotton was trying to accomplish, was to map these routes. He actually went out and cleared them. And I think our goal now is to share those maps and get people out there, because if we don't use them, they will disappear and they will go away. And that's a huge loss from a cultural standpoint and from a recreational standpoint.
Yeah, and not only will they go away, but then ask yourself the next thing: what do they go away to? If we as paddlers don't value it, who will? And how does that land get used?
Yep.
Welcome back, Dave.
Yeah, thanks.
Dave, we saved the last 30 minutes for you, so
Yeah, we're all signing off, and Dave's signing off. No, we're only kidding. Actually, just let everybody know, I just dropped a link into the chat there. I'll take up to 3 people. If anybody wants to come up here and ask a question or share maybe a story about your experience at Wabakimi, it'd be great to hear that as well. But in the meantime, we'll just continue on with maybe some routes, some favorite routes that are very popular within the Wabakimi area. And I know Dave knows a lot of these. We'll get you while we can.
Yeah. Well, probably my favorite little route is called Vale Creek. And it's a very short route. It's not your epic Wabakimi loop trip, 2 weeks or whatever. But I did this with my daughter several years ago, and you got to understand, I worked on the top part of this as part of the Wabakimi project, and then communicated with Ray Talent and a bunch of other people about the other parts. And the project worked on this route back, I think it was 2017. Anyway, it's accessible from Trail Lake Road, either the top of Tunnel Lake or there's a portage to the lake called Rocky Island Lake, and then Rocky Island Lake you can portage into Tunnel Lake. Then you can actually paddle through a tunnel under the railroad tracks into Tunnel Lake. And Tunnel Lake is a big, fairly good sized lake. And then there's a very rough portage at the very bottom of Tunnel Lake to a lake called Mountain Lake. And Mountain Lake is one sweet little lake. And I shouldn't even tell anybody about it.
Your hidden gem.
But I think the only fish in it are lake trout. And so when I took my daughter, we skipped the top part and we just flew into Mountain Lake. And I have a YouTube video that's in our Friends of Wabakimi YouTube channel. And we flew into Mountain Lake. So it was her first little beaver ride. And that was lots of fun. And we spent a couple days on Mountain Lake, and we found where the lake trout were, and we caught lots of little lake trouts and had good eating and explored the lake. And then there's a steep portage drop down into Vale Creek. And Vale Creek's a very scenic little route. Now, over the horizons, there may be some logging on the west side, and a few portages. And you're down into a fairly good sized lake called Vale Lake, and Vale Lake has got pike and lake trout in it, and it's in a one really nice campsite, and it's one of those little routes that doesn't get a lot of use. So there's a couple portages that are a little rough and need some clearing, and so one of my goals in life is to get back to the Vale Creek route with the saw and do some portage improvement. But it's short and sweet. You come out on a lake called Nameban Lake, and Nameban Lake can be accessed from Highway 527 on a short little logging spur road. There are a few people that go in there and just day trip into Nameban Lake, which also has pike and walleye and lake trout in it. So just a sweet little short route. 2016, John Sinclair says they saw a caribou on the north end of Vale Lake. So as late as 2016, we know caribou got there. So that's just one little route that I happen to really, really like. It's short. It's got a few little challenges, downhill portage, and the portage into Vale Lake is a little rough and needs some work. It probably hasn't been done a lot in recent years. That's just one of Dave's little honey trips.
Is that on that list that you sent me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to.
That's on Dave's short trips.
Good stuff.
There's all these other.
You have somebody in the basement here like to bring up there.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
There's other people that do these huge long trips. I like the short little trips.
Yeah, they don't always have to be the big ones, right? Let's just welcome to the panel here, Donald Dakota. How you doing, Donald?
Hey, I'm doing well, Dennis. How are you?
Good. Long time no see. Finally had the opportunity to meet you down at Canoecopia.
Yeah, that was good. It's different now looking at you back on the computer after meeting in person. So
I hear you.
Oh yeah.
Got a question for the panel today?
Well, more of a comment, but maybe two things. So it's a great show. Love all the information. Absolutely. I think like I'm getting a lot of backlash with my mic right here, but what would be good for a lot of people to know with doing trips in Wabakimi is they don't necessarily have to do huge trips. They could fly into one lake like Smooth Rock and spend 10 days paddling around that lake itself.
Right.
Not necessarily doing a huge trip. Comes from experience. I like to go to bigger lakes now, like Temagami, and spend, I don't mind portaging, of course, but spend more time in a given area to get to know the area instead of having to do some big 12-day loop or something to cover ground.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, and then something I had to chime in on is there's a lot of talk about the pictographs and taking photos. So, where I'm coming from is our family's Cherokee, native in the States, and I carry a drum for powwows and for ceremonies. I've been taught a lot of things over the past 30 years. So, one of the most important things I was taught by one of our elders was there's too many rules and don't take things so literally. Be a good person. That's what matters. And I've seen in the chat about getting permission to paddle certain areas and certain regions, and that's a great thing to do. It is a good thing. You'll build good relationships with whichever First Nations you're at. But like with the pictographs, I've been taught not to take pictures of them, but it's okay. In my notebooks, I'll draw what I see and give a description. It's all really personal because I've seen First Nation elders that'll have be with someone filming a YouTube video, and they'll say, "Yeah, film this pictograph right here," and they'll splash water up on it with canoe paddle so it comes up better on film. So it all depends on who you're asking, even in the same native band. Like in Cherokee teachings, a word will differ depending on what side of the mountain it came from. So and it's no different than anything else. So like for people that don't know, you go up to these pictograph sites or sacred sites, just be a good person. Don't disrupt stuff. Enjoy what you see, and just enjoy being there and enjoy the history of it, and move on and have a good time. It's that kind of clears up a lot of things for a lot of people. We'll get like with our drum teachings, we'll get youth kids come in, and nobody knows if they're native or not. Nobody cares either, but they'll ask all kinds of great questions, and we always just tell them, just have a good heart and be a good person. That's all that matters, and everyone will have a good time. So just had to comment on that, clarify a couple things. So
well, it brings a little clarity.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and it's all in how you're taught and who you're asking, and just being. It's no different than being respectful of any other thing or property that is out there when we're outside. Whether it is First Nations, something left behind, or it is something that the Park Service established. It's the same thing. It all should be respected and cared for because it's part of where we all live and we all do things.
Makes sense. Makes sense for sure. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Oh, for sure.
Does anybody have anything to add to that on panel? No? Nope. Got a bunch of no's. Thanks, Don. I appreciate you coming up and sharing that with us.
Oh, for sure. Happy to.
Once again, great to meet you down at Canoe. I'm sure it won't be the last time.
Oh my gosh, no. We'll be back for sure.
Awesome. Okay, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. We'll see ya.
Cheers. Yeah, you know what? That kind of makes sense. Be a good person. Be respectful. Those pictographs have been around for a long, long time. Let's keep them there for a long, long time for generations to see. We do have another person down in the basement here to bring up on panel. Welcome, Canoe. How you doing? Canoe, how you doing? Good, good. Can you see us?
I just wanted to ask about flying up just below the Albany River, and then I can see.
Can you just repeat that again? You're breaking up a bit there. Maybe get a little closer to your microphone.
Hey, I just want to know about flying up.
We got you.
Okay. I'm going to think about flying up to just below the Albany River, and then paddling out to Armstrong. Leisurely, how long would it take?
If I understood the question, it was getting on the Albany River and then working your way back to Armstrong. Is that the question?
Below.
But below. So like fly into Fort Hope and then come down to Armstrong. I'm trying to get a sense of where you. You could probably do that in less than 2 weeks, depending on how much time you want to spend at it. I actually paddled the Mishnikaw into the Albany to the Atwood, and then all the way down the Petagetiguchi to the whatever that road is that's east of Armstrong. And it took me 21 days to do that. And so what I think you're describing is about half of that distance. So that's why I'm saying a week and a half, 2 weeks maybe, depending on how hard you want to work at it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if he had a bad connection there or if he just ducked out, but Canoe, thanks for the question. There's another gentleman that had the opportunity to meet this past weekend at the Sportsman Show in Toronto. So, yeah, this is pretty awesome. Isn't it great meeting different people, all different walks of life at these events, and everybody with the same common goal, right? That's a good thing. Yeah. So you know what, we're drawing on here towards the end of the show. I don't know if anybody else in the chat has any questions. If you do, now is the time to put it up. But right now, we're just going to learn a little bit more about Friends of Wabakimi, and where we can reach out and contact them, what we can do to help support their efforts, perhaps by becoming a member. Who wants to tackle this one, Vern?
The webmaster, Dave. Dave is the keeper of all knowledge.
We have a website, wabakimi.org, wabakimi.org, and you can find our Join Us page there. It'll take you to our interactive Wild Apricot Wabakimi website, and there's an online application there. We still have our show specials running, where if you get a 1-year membership at a special price, you also get the guidebook, the updated planning map, and the large canoe sticker, which looks great on a canoe. So, or you can just get a regular 1-year $25 Canadian membership, and then you get discounts on our map projects, our mapping offerings. So we're trying to get people to join, because the larger membership we have, the stronger voice we have for wilderness preservation and habitat preservation in the Wabakimi area. And that's kind of the mission that Uncle Phil gave us to continue on, is to fight for the resource and advocate for the resource. Because if we don't use it, we'll lose it, as Kevin Callan and Hap Wilson said a couple of weeks ago on your show.
Yeah. Elaborate on the Uncle Phil.
Uncle Phil Cotton, the old codger who had a place in, retired music teacher, retired outfitter, had a place in Thunder Bay, and he ran the Wabakimi project from 2004 to 2018. There's all kinds of information on our website about him, including my 2 interviews with Uncle Phil. And he was quite the character. And we show up at his place, and he'd have the trips all organized, the food all organized. You just bring your clothes and a rain jacket. And then I'd say, Phil, where are we going? And he'd say, it's a state secret. He wouldn't tell us where we were going. And they'd send us out somewhere, and we'd spend a week on base camp, or maybe move a couple times. And we'd work our butts off clearing portages. And there was a guy with a chainsaw. I used to walk behind the guy with the chainsaw and throw all these big logs off the trail. And amazing how fast you can clear a portage when you have a chainsaw with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So it was quite the experience, and made all kinds of friends. And I would have got to Wabakimi probably on my own, if it hadn't been for an opportunity to just show up and work. I paid money to show up and work, and it was loads of fun, and just made so many friends. And here I am still working at it. So it's a great organization, and we're really working on the conservation issues. And Maurice and Vern have really done a lot working on the forest practices issues. And these battles go on. They're the same as everywhere. The timber industry wants to cut. The habitat's taking a beating. And we're going to continue advocating to protect the habitat. And maybe someday we'll turn the corner.
We had a comment way back in the chat there. Somebody was asking about on the portage trails, trail tape, or yay or nay?
Well, it was the policy of the project to remove the tape. But when I went down Vale Creek, they'd left some tape, and I was damn glad they had, because then I could follow where the trail was for sure, because I don't think anybody had been over it in the previous 3 years. So it's probably best to remove it. But there's times when, if it's a remote thing, it's good to leave a little bit. But that's just my opinion.
Okay, and I'm going to ask this because I am a printer by trade, right? And I have the opportunity to print, like portage markers and stuff like that, right? And I've been known to bring portage markers on on trips with me to better mark, the start of a portage or something along that lines. Is that a welcome thing in Wabakimi, or is that something that would be shunned upon?
I think that would distract from the wilderness. And that's part of the argument about the tape. It distracts from the wilderness, but yet there are times when that's the difference between getting from one side of the portage to the other, is that you find a little stub of tape and you're in the right place.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't advocate putting glowy, glossy signs and markers out there, because that detracts from the wilderness experience.
I'm not talking something big and gaudy. I have to carry this, right?
Yeah. I mean,
okay, that's good to know, because, like I say, I tend to carry something like that in my pack as just a trail marker, because sometimes you just can't find a portage, right?
But
as Dave said,
it's really a no trace environment. You really should, whatever you bring in, you should take out.
Got it. Nope. And that comes to the respect thing, right? So that's cool. We got one more person here in the basement. About 8 minutes left in the show, so let's bring up our last panelist here. We got good old Kevin Callan. What's a show without Kevin?
I know. I'm not supposed. I'm not supposed to. I've still lost my voice. Wow. It's gone.
Yep.
It's a good thing I'm not on a speaking tour. It's a good thing.
That's this is from last week at Canoecopia, right?
No, it's funny. I taught today with my students, and I teach tomorrow. And so when I got home, I had a phone meeting with my doctor, because I'm thinking, this has got to be, I've done COVID tests beyond belief. I go, I don't have COVID, but I got to have COVID. But something's going on. And he goes, Kevin, stop talking. I told you this a week ago. Stop talking. Anyway, but I'm not. I got two questions, because I've been typing a lot. And actually, Beth, you're freaking amazing. I see you. You're watching my comments. You are better than all of them. I'm saying, like, know what's going on.
I agree.
Oh, no. She's the watchdog of everybody. The friends of so yeah, a couple of things are going on. Yes, I talked about the First Nation stuff, whatever. First of all, that is my thing. I do. It's not law. It's not a rule. I do that. So if everybody's looking at those comments I was doing about, you should ask people, the First Nations, if you should go to Cliff Lake, you don't have to do that. It's not law. It might be. Actually, it might be soon, but not yet. And respect is the one thing. So that's just what I do personally. I've always done for years. And yes, it takes a long time. It takes patience, because we're silly white men. Okay. So the other thing is, what is going on in the next 10 years with the Friends of Wabakimi? Because Phil, first of all, cheers to Phil. Okay. I spent a lot of time with him at shows, very passionate individual. Cheers to him. Also, cheers to you Americans. And I know people are saying, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of Americans on this Friends of Wabakimi. Isn't Wabakimi? That's bullshit. Okay. The history of time in Northwestern Ontario, 94% of users in Northwestern Ontario, Quetico, Woodland Caribou, Wabakimi, have always been, for the last 50 to 60 years or more, Americans. Get used to it, right? Because people in Toronto aren't going to drive 2 days to get to those places. So you guys have paddled that area, and they know that area. What's really funny is I spent last weekend on a stage with Cliff Jacobson, the head honcho of the American paddling people, and I'm on stage with him debating. And true Canadian, I said, Cliff, you're right. I'm wrong.
Twice the speed.
It's funny. He's a great guy. I love hanging around. All right. Anyway, I'm blabbing. So next 10 years, and I'll get Beth to answer this, because she seems more organized than you guys.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Beth,
Beth, you, Beth. In the next 10 years of Friends of Wabakimi.
We have plans. So absolutely, access is very important. Safe access and broad access. How do you do it? How do you get there? And how do you paddle it safely and with respect? It'll be critical. And as Bruce has said, we're either going to log it to death or we're going to love it to death. And I myself would prefer to love it to death than to log it. We have seen the logging going on, and if you're living down in the Toronto and Waterloo area, I would highly encourage you to hire Bruce, give him $5-10 for gas, and take you up one of those roads and see what's going on with the logging practices. See it with your own eyes, and then opine about it. Don't just opine about it without seeing it. You got to see it first. And we need to restore and augment these paddling routes so that we value these routes. We do it for recreation. Ontario, the province, values mining, forestry, and commercial tourism equally. A third, a third, a third. So as an American, I constantly write to the ministry and I say, I am a commercial tourist. I purchased the Ontario Outdoors card. I purchase a fishing license. I pay for these fees. I am your commercial tourist, and you have to value me. So I see for Friends of Wabakimi, that's a very important mission, is preserving not only the park, but the boundaries of the park, because it's a watershed. And as we've gone through in Minnesota with the boundary waters, if we denigrate and deteriorate the perimeter, we deteriorate the heart of the park. So that's very important, and that was at the heart of Phil Cotton, and that continues to be the heart of the Friends of Wabakimi. I think that's one, is access, and two is continuing to recognize the pressure on the park, whether it's environmental or climate change or just use of the park. And continuing to have these discussions like we've had tonight. Graciously, thank you for the opportunity to Dennis, but to talk about flagging tape and blazes and campsites and how do we travel these areas. And it's not black and white, and you can't compare. It's not always apples to apples. And traveling Wabakimi is a little different than traveling in Quetico. So sometimes a blaze can make a difference. If you see that blaze and it's river left, it can make a difference literally in saving your life versus going over those rapids if you don't have the map marked.
That's cool. So Dave, what is your favorite campsite in the entire park?
There's a lovely campsite on the Boiling Sands River. It's not even marked on our Friends of Wabakimi maps, but it's on one of Lawrence Mills' maps.
Yeah,
it's just
I know
so
that
cute.
site.
Yeah, it's very sweet. It's before you get to Smooth Rock, and it's on the left. Yeah, it's just and I slipped off a rock there with my full pack on and almost broke a leg, but that was another story. Anyway, had one nice night there with my daughter.
Awesome. And Vern, what is your favorite lake in the park?
Oh, favorite lake. Geez, I thought you were going to ask me what my favorite waterfall was. I'd say Shapaswaya, which is up in the northeast corner of the park, just because it's big and it's remote, and there are as speckled trout or brook trout as we call them in Iowa. There's a lot of things to see and do, and it's hard to get there.
Don't tell me about that spot.
It's not going to change the number of people going in there. It's hard to get to.
Shh. All right. Thanks.
Use it or lose it, Kevin.
All right, Miigwech.
Cheers, man.
Thank you.
So, Kevin, are you a friend of Wabakimi?
I don't know. I bought all their maps and books, so I have to take another loan out of the bank. For love of God.
Because I will be tomorrow, everybody.
Oh my Lord! It's like I got shelves of Wabakimi stuff everywhere, and
well, Kevin, we'll work a swap with you. We'll make you a business member if you give us some swag for as prizes for our photo contest.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need stuff for our photo contest. We're running.
Yeah, but nobody goes to the park, so there's no photos of the park. Nobody goes there.
We got some great photos last year, and we have a 2023 photo contest going.
Cool.
We need some good prizes. So
I will give prizes for that. You know what? I'll just give a prize if everybody goes to Wabakimi, because it's a long friggin' drive.
Well, get on a train and get a sleeper car and get off
I
at
did
Ellen
that.
Water Bridge.
I took a film crew there once on the sleeper car. 2 days later, we got there, and they said, "We don't ever want to work with you ever again, Kevin."
This, one thing you haven't talked about are the storms, and they are pretty epic in that park.
No, it's very beautiful weather. No bugs. Beautiful weather all the time.
Well, we might have to have that for another show. Anyway, we are at 9:00. Time to close this baby up for this time around. But Kevin, you're welcome to stick around for the green room if you'd like to, and we'll see you there.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
What a great guy! What a great guy he is. Hey, you know what? Vern, Dave, Beth, and to Maurice, who really tried valiantly to be a part of this show. Sorry he couldn't. He couldn't hold on. We forgot to do the giveaway tonight, Dave, didn't we? Is it? I guess it's not too late, is it? We'll do that in closing. Okay, you know what? We did have a small giveaway, but the conversation was going so good. So the question that we had for tonight's giveaway, and let me get the banner going here across the screen because it's here somewhere. Where'd it go? Where's my? I need an executive producer for this show to help with this. Okay, there you go. So as usual, everybody, we're going to do a little swag giveaway. We're going to give away 3 Friends of Wabakimi stickers. I'll throw in a Canoe Hound Adventures prize pack as well. You have until Sunday night at 11 o'clock to get your answer into, and we talked about this quite a bit there a little earlier. Who was the eccentric inventor who built unique cabins in Wabakimi? So drop your answer in, and we just lost Beth. I hope she can come back in. If you can answer this question, send an email. You got some Friends of Wabakimi decals for your canoe or your food barrel or wherever it might be, or your bumper or your car even, right? Do a little broad advertising, right? And I'll throw in Canoe Hound Adventures packs. We're going to give away 3 sets of prizes. So with that being said, I'll leave the questions going here for a moment and get your answers in. Just want to thank you guys, Dave, Vern, and Beth. Sorry you popped off screen here. She must have got hit by the weather, right? All the links to Friends of Wabakimi's socials and website are in the description below. Support Friends of Wabakimi. Become a member. Whether it's at the lowest level or at the higher level, where you're going to get all kinds of the planning maps and stuff like that. Get in at whatever level you can and help these people. Keep Wabakimi what it is now. Let's help their fight. I'm not sure about the types of political fights that they might have, maybe like Friends of Tamagami have and stuff like that. But you know what? Support the cause if you can. By all means, get yourself signed up. So, Dave, thanks very much for tuning in.
Thank you.
And to Vern, I'm not sure where he disappeared to, but there he is. Hey, welcome back.
I'm back.
I'm going to drop you guys into the basement. If anybody has Beth's text or something, text her and tell her we're doing the green room so that they can pop on over. Or she can pop over.
Okay.
All righty. So I'll see you guys in a brief moment.
All right.
Thanks a million, guys. All righty. Hopefully everybody enjoyed this show as much as I did. I am looking so forward to going to Wabakimi this year. Hopefully, I know a couple of my canoe partners were in the chat there, even though they didn't pipe in too much. But I know they are excited as well for a trip up into that area. So, you know what? If you haven't already planned a trip up there, or if you haven't, you know what? Now's the time to start planning that. But don't do the same route as I am, because I don't want to see anybody while I'm up there. So that's a good thing. Anyways, next week's show, please tune into or check in on Facebook there to see what we have coming down the pipe for next week. And we'll definitely see you all then. Just as a reminder, next week or this weekend in Waterloo is the Backcountry Canoe Symposium. The Ontario Backcountry Canoe Symposium. Tickets are still available on their website. Come on out, see a few great presentations, and we'll see you there. Anyways, everybody have yourselves a great week. And remember to please do keep the adventures alive. Cheers.